Hi, Eric. Welcome to the show.
Hey, welcome.
How your last name is correctly pronounced?
Well, the French way is Tauvin.
Tauvin.
Yeah. The American way is Tauvin, whatever you can come
So
up
Eric
with.
Tauvin or Tauvin?
Yeah,
Eric Tauvin.
Yeah, Tauvin. Yeah.
Tauvin. Okay. Now, what was your first computer?
All right, that's a good question. Do you mean the first computer that I use or the first computer that I bought?
This is a hard question because I thought about that, but buying doesn't matter. Maybe using if you have special relation to the computer,
Yeah. So, frankly, the very first computer that I actually put my hands on was in Paris. There's a community center called Centre Pompidou, and they had this computer, which I have no idea what it was. But they had this logo language on it. I don't know if you remember.
For sure. It was the turtle.
The little turtle. And that is my first recollection of actually putting my hand on the computer. I can't really say that I was hooked at that point. I was probably about 9 years old when that happened. I started getting hooked when I was about 13. So a little bit of backstory. So in France, there's this store called Galerie Lafayette, which is kind of like a Macy's stores, multiple stories, and they have inside they have booths. Like here they have a booth for makeup and things like that. Well, amazingly enough, in that store there was a booth for Tandy, which is Radio Shack, as we know it here. And they had this little booth set up like in a U shape, and they had a bunch of business computers there, which is really weird because it's a weird location. This is a consumer store, not a business, store. But so the guys that worked there were basically, twiddling their thumb all day long. And I would go there after school and just play with the computer, and they were okay with it. Now, I quickly realized, so the first one that I played was probably a Tandy Model 2. And then I moved on to a Tandy Model 3, probably about 13 years old or so. It was probably 1980. Now, I bought a couple of the 5 1/4 floppy disk, because you had to use those. And I quickly realized that I wanted to write software. Which was fairly difficult at the time because there was not a lot of resources.
Why you wanted to write software?
Well, because I was, this was a business computer. I had absolutely no interest in the software that was on the computer. It did nothing for me. I didn't care about typing. I didn't care about, pseudo Excel. There was no Excel at the time, but pseudo calculation. I didn't care. So I kind of wanted to explore and see what I can do, and kind of thinking about that logo thing, in my head. It's like, hey, can I do like animation on the screen, pixel, can I move pixel around and so forth. So what I did is I went to the library and found a book on assembly language, and so started doing that. And I remember actually buying a Popular Mechanics magazine because in the back of it they had assembly code.
Okay.
I had no idea what it did, to tell you the truth, 99% of the time. And considering how ancient the computer was, it was basically write a screen, save, write another screen, save, and then in the end run and fix all the typos that you have, right? You remember those days, right?
So why I'm smiling? Because my first computer was ZX Spectrum, but I had a French manual, and I don't understand French. So I did the same. So there was lots of text. Then BASIC came. It's like I have no idea what's doing. I just copied it over and tried to figure it out what actually happens, right? So it's similar in your case.
Yeah. So talking about the ZX81, being in France, I was able to get my hand on the ZX81 when they came out in 1981 or so. I hated that computer. Having to deal with the tape recorder, the rubber
keys, right? There was the
rubber keys were awful. So I think a year or so later, I was able to get my hand on something that was called an Auric 1, which was basically the same inside processor as a ZX81, but it had a much better keyboard and so forth. So that was the first two computers I actually bought. I ended up actually getting a 10D3, but it was given to me.
So back to the shop. So you wanted to write software, and you are not happy with the business software. So what do you would like to write then?
Well, the first thing that I wrote personally versus copying and pasting, right, or copying and typing in this case, is a horse race handicap software. So betting on horses is very, very popular in France. It's something that people do. And it was very simple. You enter the horse's name. You could do up to 3 horses. And it had the little cursor, and it had some random, and the cursor would move. And basically one would win, and the 2 other ones were number 2 and number 3. I had a little bit of logic in there, not much. And it took me months, to get it, going. And what happened is one of the salesperson that was there, actually a manager, he's like, oh, enter this information. So I had a handicap, you have a handicap for your horse. So I had that. And I think by that time I could do 5 horses, which is pretty close to a regular race. So he's like, oh, enter this information. You're looking at the newspaper, the horses. I entered the information. And he's like, okay, I'll play your results. And if I win, I'll give you some money. I'm like, sure, it doesn't cost me anything, and turns out to be he won. But turned out to be that since I was underage, he couldn't really give me money, not legally. So he gave me an old 10D Model 3 that they had on demo.
But nice manager, right?
Yeah.
But I still don't understand what your software did actually. What does it mean? What do you actually calculate there?
Basically, I just did a random race, and so the cursor would move, for each horses, right? It would move randomly, and then one would win, and one would be second, and one would be third, and and so forth. So it was based a little bit on the handicap, favor the one that have a better handicap, which is not really the way you want to play, because you want to make a lot of money, not just a little money. But anyway, so it was very, very, very basic. But
it's more or less luck that you won, right?
Oh yeah, completely.
Because I thought this was something, logic. It was your achievement that you won. This was just it was you've written your game. There was like a random, or almost a random result with a little bit of handicap, and the handicap is like the quality of the horse.
Yes. So the handicap is basically how much people are betting on the horse. The more they bet, the better the handicap is. Just like sport betting and stuff.
Okay, but I had no idea about sport betting, so I'm asking. So I had no idea, and I never saw horse races.
So basically, the more people bet on the horse, the less you win, right?
Okay.
Well, because your handicap,
Okay.
Now, so a horse that's not meant to win, that hasn't won anything and wins, you're going to make a fortune. And so the way you win as far as horse races is you can win by placing. In other words, you say, okay, this horse is going to be number 1, this horse is going to be number 2, this horse is going to be number 3, and you can win money that way. Or you can say, well, this horse is going to be within the first 3. And that's what that person ended up winning. So I didn't actually pick the winning horse. I just picked the horse that made it to the top 3.
Okay, and the manager just earned lots of money. So won lots of money with that.
Quite a bit, enough that he was willing to give me a used 10D3, which were a pretty expensive computer back in the days.
But this is a great story, right? This is excellent.
Yeah, it's and at that point, I was so hooked. Every day after school, I was there for hours until dinner.
For a kid, this is for you. You are the king, right? I can imagine if I were a teenager, I would get something like this. It's like incredible, right?
Oh yeah, and it's just like not until later on was I able to afford buying a computer.
Yeah,
and and it's just at that point there was absolutely no way I would have. I was still in school. There was no way I could have bought a computer.
And your parents, what they did they like that, or what was interest reaction, right?
Yeah. So my parents were divorced at the time. My dad worked with computer, but he works with mainframe.
Okay.
So that wasn't his thing. And my mom was always very supportive for me, even though, as a kid, I had a tendency to try things and not pursue them, tried a lot of different things. But there's a few things that I stuck to, computers being one of them, music being another one. But my mom was really supportive, and by the time I was able to be a computer, my mom had a bar, I was able to bartend and make some money. So I was able to buy the computer. And I went to England. My dad's company had this exchange program. So students would exchange during the summer. So I went to England quite a bit. So I ended up being in England when the ZX81 was just come out. So I was able to buy one for a small amount of money. And so the interesting part of all of this is I've never learned to type on a French keyboard. Later on, when I got a job at Apple, I worked for Apple in France and then moved to the US. One of the orientation people is like, "Oh, we scrunch around for you French keyboard." I'm like, "I don't know how to type on a French keyboard. I have never typed on a French keyboard." All the computers that I used as a kid were, American keyboards.
Yeah. And after the horse race program, so what is actually the name of the software? It's always interesting. How you named, the software?
If I had a name, I don't recall it.
Usually it's like, Horse 2000 or I don't know, Power Horse or something, right?
I think it wasn't, I wasn't in the software industry.
Okay.
I was a kid that got some information, and the only information I was getting was like from Popular Mechanics and things like that. So I wasn't really into, there was nothing like sharewares or anything of the sort at the time, at least that I knew of. If there was, I was not aware of it. So I don't recall if there was a name for it. I'm sure there was, but I don't specifically recall what it was.
But by the way, as thinking about the gift of the computer, this is like almost like a life changer, right? So who knows?
For me, that at that point I was already hooked, but at that point it was like I spent all of my time, and that's how I got the job at Apple. Ultimately, by the time Apple, Apple France was really big. As a matter of fact, when Steve Jobs left, they hired Jean-Louis Gasset, which was the president of Apple France. Apple France was doing better, actually, for the longest time than Apple in the US.
Why? I mean, this is strange, right? Why?
Probably because I don't. I'm guessing a little because I don't quite remember.
Yeah.
Probably because I was the first one that they set up overseas. I don't think there was any other ones. And on top of that, the computers were extremely expensive, much more expensive. Like the Macs, when they came out, they were probably like $20,000 back then. In the 80s. I mean, that's a lot of money. So when to get back on track, when Apple came to town. They started going to the various computer groups and so forth to find people, to work there and to help with testing and so forth. And well, since I was the kid in town, they got to me. And the interesting part at that time is that actually
how they found you. How they found you? Just
they went to a local computer user group and they asked around, and everybody, they went to multiple ones, my understanding, and everybody said, you have to talk to this guy. I mean,
And what did you do with the computer? So what happened between, the horse software and now Apple? You wrote,
so I wrote? So I started writing a bunch of stuff, and I actually got into the Atari ST 1024.
Okay.
The main reason for that is because it had a built-in MIDI interface, which the Mac didn't. And there was actually no Mac back then. So, and that was, so I was already working on the 68K processor. So I was doing assembly on the 68K, which was very attractive to Apple because that's what their forthcoming computer. Don't forget, when I joined Apple, the only thing they had out really was the Apple II, which, by the way, I never used until way later on.
Okay.
I completely bypassed the Apple II craze.
Okay.
Right. I went to something completely different. So they went around and asked around, which people were, and so I got a job, even though I was
How old were you?
I was 16.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. And so I kept on going to school at the same time, so I couldn't work full time, even though it was full time. I just spent a lot of time in the office. And then about 2 years later, right before I turned 18, I got offered a job in the US.
So how was the work at Apple for you? So, I mean, this was also incredible. As a teenager, right?
Yeah. So I worked on the precursor of the Mac. I didn't work on the Lisa. I worked on something called the Mac X. I actually wrote the first resource editor for the Mac before there was ResEdit. And it was not as good as ResEdit. It was very bare bone. But that is the only way you could edit icons and you could edit any of that stuff. There was no other way to do it. And apparently that impressed a few people in the US, and they just wanted me to, take it to the US market. So
was it hard for you to write it, or you enjoyed it, or what was the story? I mean,
I probably had a couple years of 68K assembly behind my belt at that time. It was something I was very, very familiar with.
Okay.
So I didn't have a huge learning curve with the Mac X. I was able to get right into the meat of it pretty quickly. There was a little difference when I moved to the US. So long story short, I moved to the US about 3 months before I started working. My mom had a friend that was doing an MBA, so I stayed with him. And about a month or so after I moved in, I got a letter from Apple asking me if I wouldn't mind coming in. I wasn't set to start for another couple months. And when I came in, basically they had hired my boss and me. So my boss was still going to be my boss in the US. But when I went to that meeting, they told me that he had found another job. So they asked me if I wanted his job. So here's me, 18 years old, right? Just turned 18 with a crew of 40 people, which most of them were twice my age.
Okay.
I had no clue what I was doing, but you know what? It was so exciting. Didn't matter.
It worked well?
Yeah, it worked. It worked out for me. So I ended up doing I ended up being the manager of their R&D and
this is incredible.
I know. And mostly for translation stuff, translating to other languages and so forth. I did about 4 years of that, and then kind of saw the writing on the wall that ultimately their goal was to take my software and put it into ResEdit. So there was not really a huge need. So I ended up, for about a year, I ended up doing the worldwide training, went to university and trained people. A lot of people don't understand that back in the days, pretty much every single piece of software was written in Apple. It doesn't matter if it was Microsoft or whatever. They would actually come to Apple and have engineers help them write software. So we did a lot of training in universities and so forth, because we had a lot of people that would come and intern at Apple and so forth. So I went all over the world for about a year, and then I started my own company after that.
Okay. And how was the work at Apple? So you were in Cupertino, actually.
I was in Cupertino. Yeah. It was great for me because it was coming from France to the US, a little bit of the language barrier. My written English was really good, but my spoken English, could use some work. So there was a little bit of that, but it was so exciting. Everything was new. The cities were much bigger, the cars were much bigger, and then I had this group of people that were extremely talented. That I could connect with, which I never had before. When I was in France, not to toot my own horn, but I was so much more advanced than the guys that were in the user groups that I didn't have a whole lot to talk about. And I was not a gamer or anything like that, so I I wanted to write software. I didn't want to write, play games or
But what was your ultimate goal? So you wanted to write software. So and usually you would like something to achieve. You would like to write, I don't know, operating system, a game. What was your goal?
My goal was simple. And that's been my entire career.
Okay.
I write something that I need.
Okay.
I do not write things that I don't need. I am the best beta tester for my software. I found all my bugs because I write things that I need.
Okay.
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, that's beside the point. But I have zero interest in working for a company and they tell me you're going to work on this. I'm going to work on something that I need. So it doesn't prevent me from working for a company and working on their software, but I'm going to learn the software, how it works, and I'm going to write what I need. And my take on that is if I need it, I'm not the only one. There's a bunch of people that need it. And that's what I did with the Linkblog. That's what I did with my entire career. I always write things that I need. So when I was at Apple, when I first started, I didn't have a way to edit things. So I wrote an editor.
Okay.
Simple.
Yeah. Okay. So what it means is is the editor still, it ships still with Mac? You know it?
No, they incorporate into ResEdit. I still make a little bit of residual money on it because in France, it's a little different. Like in the US, if you work for a company and you write a piece of software, it's theirs. In France, it's a little different. So I mean, I think I make like $25 a year on it or something like that. But I used to make some money on it. It used to be bundled with the Macs and on CDs and so forth. But not anymore. It's been too long.
But you worked alone on the software?
I did it completely on my own when I was in Apple France, and then when I moved to the US, then I got other products that I dealt with to do translation and R&Ds on and so forth.
This is incredible, right? So, I mean, this is like something ships with Apple, and back then it was used a lot, the ResEdit, right? So the editor.
Yeah, it was until ResEdit came out. It was basically the only way developers could easily edit resources, icons, whatever, anything that's in binary, basically.
Okay, so then what did it? You left Apple? Or you were fired, or what happened then?
No, so I left Apple. I did about a year going all over the world. That got tiresome after a bit, and I had a friend of mine that was working in the Apple legal department, and so we decided to start a consulting firm. He stayed at Apple. I quit, and he stayed for a little bit when we got the company going, and it was a different times. There was we were in San Francisco. We're in San Francisco at the time. We were pretty much the only Mac consulting firm out there. Okay. There was a little bit of PCs, and I mean, we made a lot of mistakes. Don't get me wrong. It took us a while to get started. We got crazy, got an office downtown, and so forth, and we had no customers, right? But we ended up doing some pretty interesting work. What we ended up doing...
How you can imagine you back then? You were like, suit and manager, or more like a hacker guy?
No. This is Apple, dude. Everybody wears tie-dye T-shirts and shorts.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
There's no three-piece suit,
Okay.
It was not allowed.
Like Oracle, more like Apple. So like Californian style.
Yeah.
Okay. And in downtown, where was it in San Francisco, your office?
It was on Gary Street, Gary Market, yeah.
Wow.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Expensive. Half a floor.
How expensive was it?
Oh, I don't remember, but it was half of. I don't know. It was like probably, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't remember. But it wasn't cheap. And we started running out of money. So we had to, we did stupid things like we print flyers and had to pay kids to put them on cars and things like that. Nothing. But the good thing that we did is back then there was only one computer store in California, and it was called Computerware. And we befriended the salespeople in those stores.
Very good.
And guess what? When businesses needed stuff, that's what they would go to. They would ask. So one of the first projects that we did is we had this company, a big law firm in San Francisco, that wanted a networked address book with an admin interface. And they wanted to use HyperCard because back then HyperCard shipped on every single Mac. So it was free. There was no cost. We went to the meeting, didn't know much about it, and they didn't like us at all. Because I'm like, why don't you use like, a database, DB4, FileMaker Pro, and they didn't like us. But then I went home and I spent the whole night working on the prototype. And the next morning I got a call from a contact at Computerware, and he's like, they really didn't like you guys, and they talked to somebody else after you, and it was much better and everything. I was like, well, I got a prototype. It was actually fully functional. He's like, okay, well, just FedEx it to them. So I FedEx it to them, and we got our first contract. And from that point, it just snowballed. I mean, we ended up doing the first point-of-sale system for the shopper image. The shopper image is, you might be familiar with it. They used to have this catalog where you could buy all those fancy products. But they actually had stores before they had the catalog.
Okay.
So we created a point-of-sale system. There was no such thing as a point-of-sale. It did not exist.
Okay.
We worked for JPL. I actually went on the ground in their silo for 6 months, designing a floor plan where you could actually tell it where you were, and it would tell you what's on that floor. But it had to be customizable on their side because I was not cleared to know what was everywhere.
Okay.
Okay. So I spent, so I have this big silo from, that goes underground where they test the engines. So I was underground for about 6 months. We're doing.
Does JPL has this jet propulsion laboratory?
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
This is the NASA, where also was responsible for the for the Sea Journey in Java, right? So the Java rover, the same company. Incredible. And you did it alone, or you had some software engineers?
I was the tech guy. My partner was the business guy. Right.
So now heretical question to you. So how you needed the floor software? Because you said you only write stuff you need, but it is no way that you need a point of sale system. You
know what? I saw the need for it.
You saw the need. This is you wanted to develop what you wanted.
They didn't come to me. I came to them.
Okay.
I went to the shopper image to buy some fancy pillow, right?
Okay.
And I'm like, this is antiquated. You got to be a better way to do it. And we did that a lot. We went to local stores, and we went to desktop publishing was getting pretty big. There was this store that was kind of like Kinko. They had multiple stores, and we set up their whole network. We set up their database. I mean, we went to this company that was doing landscaping for Steve Jobs and people like that. And they wanted us to write a database with all their flowers so they could see the customers, they could see what it was, And this was before there was actually networking, and to me that was like, oh yeah, I can definitely do that, And then what started to be really, really small, I'm like, well, you probably want to do this and that and that, and then just keep on adding to it. But the vast majority of this company, we approached them; they didn't approach us. I mean, a few of them did because after a while you get known, so they're like. For example, we did an email system for KinderCare. KinderCare is, where you take your kid after schools. And back then they were using CompuServe. They were spending millions of dollars to use CompuServe to send emails. But they were not really emails. They were just notices. They would send their numbers. So there was no interaction. So we actually ended up working with Cisco to write an email system. But actually, that's something that had started beforehand. I started writing it for my own, and then we ended up,
Okay, so now I understood, because the entire time I thought, what doesn't mean that you write software what you need, but you create the need first. So you see, okay, this software is necessary. So, but this is actually what Steve Jobs did, right? Steve Jobs believed in something, and say, okay, I believe in it and I do it. So this is different, and so you can create a need and then create a software for it, and you believe in the software, and so you create software because you believe in the software, and you don't like just get program a job and you write code which you have no faith, right? No, so yeah.
And then if you look at my GitHub, for example, you'll see there's over 100 projects, and a lot of them is just little things that I need.
Yeah,
and I'm just thinking, if I need it, somebody else needs it.
Yeah,
I mean, most of them are not popular in any way, shape, or form. But that is not why I wrote them. I didn't write them to make a fortune out of them or anything. I mean, it's open source anyway, so I'm not charging anything. But a lot of them are actually pieces of stuff that I use.
I do the same. Maybe I have even more projects than you have on GitHub. Also pieces. And I just did it because I said, okay, I have a catalog on GitHub, right? Because if it's on my machine, I will never find it again. On GitHub, I remember, okay, I did this and this, and it's easier to find. And who cares? Exactly. Maybe someone can pick it or not. I never cared about licenses, whatever. And I said, okay, if someone would like to have it, then they have it. And once they ask me, to create organization, it's like, I don't know, I don't care about the organization. You can take, the project or do whatever you like. So very similar. So interesting. But your company was incredible. I mean, it sounds like, this is like your story so far is almost like, James Bond movie almost for software engineers, like, no kidding. So, okay. So you created an email-like system with Cisco, together with Cisco, and they knew that the company was small, or they suspected that there's a huge company, they didn't knew that you are alone, basically.
I needed Cisco for the router, for the modem at the time, And so the KinderCare made a deal with them because, they were spending millions of dollars a month, right? And I wrote the email system for it. So they could actually communicate, not just getting announcements, and they could send their numbers at the end of the month and so forth, I mean, a lot of projects like that, we ended up having about 32 people working for us.
Wow.
Most of them we worked in a kind of independent contractor situation where we provided the support and the clients, and we set up the contracts, do all the legal stuff, and we just take a cut on the contract, and the contractor would get the full the full amount. So we technically didn't have 32 employees. We only had 3 employees, but we had 32 people in the office. And then, I don't know, about 3 years after that, my partner, which was a lawyer by trade, wanted to take over his dad's practice. His dad was about to retire. He wanted to take his dad's practice in New Jersey. So he's like, well, what would you feel about selling the company? And I'm like, well, how much money do we have? And we had a lot of money because we worked, we didn't spend, and it's just like, so we found a consulting firm that was doing PC, and they wanted a Mac branch, if you will. And so we sold it. I ended up keeping some of the customers that I had for a long time. They didn't want to deal with anybody else. And then we kind of parted our ways. What
was the name of the company?
So the consulting firm was MacSpect.
Okay.
But you know what? I was doing a little bit of research before the talk. I cannot remember what the name of the firm that bought us was.
Okay.
But it was something and something, kind of like a lawyer title. And I would have to pull out CDs to get backup, stuff, because I just can't. Hey,
you are the best guest ever, right? So you're well prepared. So this is incredible. I didn't ask you for anything, and you prepared. This is like crazy, right?
Well, it's been so long. I mean, you're talking 40 years of software development for me, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of had to, I know you wanted to talk about the Linkblog and so forth. So I kind of had to refresh myself a little, because some of that stuff I don't use on a regular basis anymore. So, I kind of went around and. Well, let me segue to the Linkblog. So I did.
We don't have to talk. This is interesting story what you're telling, right?
Yeah.
What happened? So if if we fill the hour, so I will re-invite you back, and we can talk about Linkblog and why you hate Kotlin and Live Java and stuff like that, right? And
actually, I'm a big Kotlin guy.
Yeah, I know. This is no. I just wanted to see your reaction, but it's just really interesting. So I'm really curious. Okay,
the rest of my career, was exactly that. I started company, sold them. Started company, sold them. Okay. I did in 2000 during the .com. I went and worked for a company that was downtown here, in Bellevue, actually near Seattle. They had created something called a web companion, which was basically the tie-in between FileMaker Pro and your website. FileMaker Pro is the database that Apple created. And they basically created that in-between middleware, right? So you could communicate between the database and your website. So I worked for that company for a little bit as a director of technology, and then worked for a friend of mine that was also working with them.
One question to you, because you are very skilled, so you had assembly knowledge and you are hacker, right? So I think you enjoy to write software, right?
I do.
So, and there were already 2 jobs where you were manager. So you enjoyed the job as manager? I mean,
it's been forced onto me. Every single companies that I've worked for ended up having multiple hats. The last company, that physical company that wasn't mine, that I actually worked for, I'd managed the programmers, I managed the servers, I pretty much manage everybody except the person at the front desk.
Okay.
It's not because I want to, it's because I'm able to.
Okay.
I just have done a lot of stuff like that over the years. So when you're looking at a company with 10, 15 employees, as a manager, you kind of have to wear multiple hats. You can't just hire everybody to do everything.
But you develop software as well, or no?
As well, yeah.
Okay.
So the last 2 companies I worked for, I was director of technology, but I still wrote most of the software.
Okay, because this was like, if you're a manager, you will lose your skills in one point of time. You just cannot manage.
That is not my take on it.
Okay.
As an independent contractor, I've always had the luxury to be able to take like 3 months off. And during those 3 months, I use those 3 months to get my stuff up to speed on every single technology. One of the reasons why I got onto Java so early on is because of that.
How early? How you started with Java? When was it?
There was no Java when I started.
Oh.
I actually went to a Sun Tech Days conference, and they were talking about potentially incorporated this new language, Java, into Palm Pilot using something called J2ME.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. And I got to talk to the gal that was doing the presentation, and she got me advanced copy of the stuff because I wanted to do some Palm Pilot stuff for KinderCare. Because they were using Palm Pilots.
This is the link. So via Palm Pilot, there's the Sun connection, right? Or you knew Sun earlier? Okay.
Yeah, and so luck, not skills, right? Luck. And I once Java started coming out, I just got full bore. As a matter of fact, the company I was working for, I was pushing for them to convert the entire software to Java. The only thing we had Java was the plugins. The plugins were Java, so you could write a plugin and it would work on Mac and Windows. But I was pushing forward, and part of the reason that I left is because they didn't agree with that. Well, guess what? The biggest competition at the time was Cold Fusion.
Exactly.
There was a company called Alaire, and they got bought by Macromedia and so forth. Guess what? Cold Fusion went completely Java. They converted their entire thing to Java.
So, and that's an application server, right? So this I also remember because I forgot what the name was. I have to research this Alaire and Cold Fusion and went. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So when I left that company, I started creating my own JSP library, very much like Struts or JSTL, which did not exist at the time, and it was very complete. It had if loops, variables, the whole thing. Which, don't forget, none of that stuff existed, right?
Yeah.
and we tried to sell it. We went and talked to Macromedia and different companies, and we were just too early in the game. And
1997.
Yeah, and so that is what I used to actually create my first blog. I don't know if you remember. So my first web page was probably 1999. There was no web servers back then. You had to use Gopher. So your URL was gopher:// blah, 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 right? Because there was no Netscape yet or anything of the sort. But when the blog started picking up, there was Dave Weiner. You know, he had his company called Frontier, Userland Software actually, and he had this software called Frontier, which he used to make blogs. And he had a service called Manila, which you could basically, host your weblog. And so I did that for a little bit in early 2000. And as much as I liked the scripting language of Frontier and so forth, I just hated the whole thing. It didn't work. It didn't do what I wanted it to do. It requires too much work. It was slow. So I'm like, oh, I got this library, this, tag library that can do all of that stuff. So over a weekend, I wrote my first blog software, which, by the way, until recently was still running for 20 some years.
And did it work on bare Java, or it was before Tomcat? So you've wrote everything.
So that would not actually, Tomcat was there. At first I used Postgres SQL, but it was really slow. So I went to MySQL, which I was already familiar with anyway, because I had done an integration with a company I was working for. Tomcat was version like 0.8 or something like that when I started. So I used Tomcat. I think I tried WebSphere at the time, BA WebSphere. Yeah, that's when I met Cedric.
Cedric was the WebLogic. This is WebLogic.
WebLogic, yeah. And tried different things, but they were all too big. Tomcat was more lean, and it worked with GSP. Which is what I needed.
You never tried Sun Java Web Server because it was. No?
I did. I mean, Glassfish and something like that.
Glassfish come later? So Glassfish was later. 3-4 years later.
Yeah, I don't think I ever tried it. I may have, but I don't think it worked for me.
It worked. I mean, so my story was similar. So I had to write a CMS system, and I had no idea of PHP. I only knew Java. So I waited until the first engine comes out, and this was the Sun Java Web Server. Yeah. It was in the year 2000, I think. Okay. And then there was like Java J2W SDK, Java Web Servlet Development Kit, and this was the beginning of Tomcat.
Yeah.
And the Sun Java Web Server, it was like an applet administration view. And the problem was the deployment. So there was no XML, nothing. So you had to create a jar and upload it. So this was, and it was commercial. So it cost you like, I don't know, 200, 600 euros. It was not huge amount of money, but there was some amount.
Money.
Yeah. So this was, okay. So, but your Linkblog, so it was basically a war.
I don't remember if it
was. No,
Linkblog,
your library. So it ran as...
So my library was basically a jar. Actually, it's a JSP library, complete. With tags.
So is it like JSP compatible library? What you wrote?
Completely. I mean, it was. Think about Strut or JSTL before.
Okay, but it was JSP based. It was not like JSP replacement. It was just JSP tag library.
It was a tag library with bunch of functions behind it.
JSTL.
JSTL was that before JSTL.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I wrote my first blog that way, and then ultimately,
what your blog was about, or why you started the blog, or why you wanted to have one.
Well, I mean, so that was the thing. So I was posting like menial things. Oh, we went to this restaurant today, that kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
And I wasn't like, I think I may have done a few like more extensive writing about Java or things like, this is how you configure this with Tomcat, this, that kind of stuff, but fairly short. But ultimately, I wasn't really interested in pouring my life in the blog or writing those.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to ask. Why you why you posted that I go to the restaurant, right? What was the motivation doing this? Like
because that's what everybody was doing at the time. They were like posting about their life, so I just like followed through.
Okay.
But very quickly, it became more about pointing to other posts about Java and so forth, and that came from this is go back full circle. I am the #1 user of my blog, and I was using it to bookmark things. There was no bookmarking. There was no any good bookmarking. I mean, you had like Delicious and Pinboard, things like that. It sucked. I wanted something that I could do a search and find something that I was interested with, right? And so I started very quickly, like 2000, right? I started very quickly just posting about things that I found on the web that interested me. And I figure if it interests me, it's going to interest somebody else.
Yeah.
And I came up with I had little icons that represented what it was about. It was about Java. It was about web. It was about this and everything. A lot of it was focused on Java. And then it started, snowballing and getting really popular. And so I ended up writing an actual link blog, which had which was a lot easier for me to deal. I was using the software called Newscrawler with a Z.
Okay.
And that was the only RSS feed readers that I found that was able to handle the 1,600 feeds that I read every day. Everything else crashed, right? But it also supported the Weblogs API or the Blogger API. And so I wrote a plugin for my link blog so I could just basically bookmark the thing in Newscrawler, click a button, it would send it to a scratchpad, and when I had enough in it, then I would publish it multiple times a day. So it made my life a lot easier. I explained it in the post. I mean, it's not like I read 1,600 feeds every day, right? I just skim through the topics, found what I'm interested with, and then look at it. And if that's interesting, I would post to it. So after a little bit, I got contacted by the Java Developer Journal.
The Blogger API, back to the Blogger API, I think it was XML RPC based, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, this is the predecessor of SOAP.
Yep.
This is the interesting part. Because the XML RPC was beautiful. It's more or less beautiful. It's like a remote procedure call with reflections. So you could have, And
I did. I mean, I still have the code for it because that's what I used for years.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful because it's just like you include the library and then you just have function calls that match the name, and that's it.
Yeah,
that is
you registered the Pojo and you could call it. So this is nice. And I was all for it. Then SOAP came out. I was still excited. I look at SOAP like this has nothing to do with XML RPC.
No, it doesn't. I know. I mean, I'm totally with you on that one. So the Blogger API makes it easy. I wrote my own link blog, so I had the features that I wanted. I got contacted by the Java Developer Journal. They wanted me to write a weekly column, which was basically the best links that I found.
And Java Developer Journal was huge back then, right? So this was
there was an actual publication. There was not,
and it was nice logo. I still remember the logo. So it really looked beautiful. Yeah.
So by the time this got really popular, I was probably having about 8 million people visiting my lead blog on a monthly basis. Yeah. I actually got kicked out of the first Google Ads program. I guess they were paying me too much.
Okay.
It was still in beta. Somebody wrote an article about it in the Register. One day they're like, "Okay, you're out of the program." I'm like, "Why?" We don't care to tell you. See ya.
Okay.
So it became pretty popular. I hooked up with the Java lobby and
Java blogs as well, right?
Yeah. So back then it was just Java lobby, and so I was part of the newsletter too. My column was called Eric's Pulse, so I had that, and then the Java Developer Journal kind of went down the tube. And so I was only doing the Java lobby stuff. I mean, overall I did it for about 7 years.
And the server side? There were any connection to the server side? Was also big, you know?
Yes, I mean, you know, what's his name that was running it back then? Yeah, I was in talk with them to do a more of an enterprise column for them, but that never panned out. I forgot with the guy that was.
This was the Italian guy, right?
Yeah. But the guy, the manager, the first manager, he works for Google now, and he's done a lot of stuff. I forgot what his name is. That'll come back to me. Anyway, but I mean, you know, we all knew each other. I mean, it's like we're all in the, you know, in the same space. You know, I mean, I didn't do the conferences or anything of that sort. You know, because I was always more of a back end kind of guy. You know, I very reluctantly had to work on, you know, UIs, you know, because I had to, but it's not my forte. I'm not really good at it. I don't really like it, but I really like the nitty gritty, you know, back end, you know. So
that's interesting because your current website looks beautiful for me. Also the blog. It's just minimalistic, but really nice. So this was actually my question, whether you are interested in design, because I really like the look and feel of your website.
No, I mean, I use Bootstrap for it. And, you know,
okay, but this is customized. I did not I did notice that this Bootstrap. So it looks really nice. So also, you know, your posts about on Blue Sky, I saw your posts about the movies, and it's still interesting, right? So, yeah.
So you know, recently I converted after 23 years, converted my blog from JSP to Rife.
This is the connection to Hert.
This did exactly, and I've been searching for a full stack framework for years, right?
One question, because this I don't think we can cover the Rife story, but 8 million views. It run still on your software or on other platforms?
Nope, that's it. Tomcat, my software. That's it.
Was it one Tomcat or a cluster of Tomcats?
Just one.
And how big was the machine, or what was it? You know, remember the hardware?
Yeah, it was pretty big. It's a Linux machine, full of memory, SSDs.
SSDs back then? No way.
Well, I mean, not back then, but it was. You know, it got to the point of being SSDs.
But what interests me, back then it was really popular. If JDG was still alive, so what hardware was it? Was it Sun? You remember?
Well, I mean, the way no, it was running Linux. If I remember, no, it was running CentOS actually.
Okay.
But the what you have to understand is that it actually was static pages.
Yeah.
The Linkblog you update, you know, each time you do a post. Everything else is kind of static. So I was using a lot of caching to basically cache, even though you may have, you know, a question mark and parameters afterwards. Most of that information was cached. So my server was never really taxed, even though I had, you know, quite a bit of requests per hour.
But the cache was still written in Java. So, I mean, everything.
Yeah, the cache was, I mean, so at first I was using
EH cache?
No, it was before that. I think it was Atlassian that came up with it. It was actually a JSP-based tag that you used around your stuff. And then it evolved, you know, I mean, over the years. I mean, you know, there's 23 years of modifying the software. So
yeah, but still, if you have lots of requests, I would say there was some concurrency going on. You get for sure several requests per second, right? Or two requests.
Yeah.
So and so what it means, it was back then, you know, challenging, you know, to do the concurrency right. So there's multi-threading, memory management. Even if it's cached, it still has to be handled, you know.
Oh yeah, it does. And I wasn't using things like Hibernate or whatever, so I was going to the database directly. But once again, I was not doing any database trip unless I just had updated the blog. You know, so
was there any crashes or whatever? Any drama?
You know, amazingly enough, you know, the very few times I had problems, they were not crashes. Maybe there was a page that wasn't working right. But I had some hardware failures, no doubt, you know. But that the software itself, I'm actually pretty proud of the fact that ultimately I've never had a big issue with it. You know, some stupid things that I did, I forgot to include this or whatever, and the page returns a 404 or something like that. Yeah. But nothing that, I mean, that's software. I mean, that server, I believe, ran for 12 years nonstop, was never rebooting.
This is about, how is those pet versus kettle, right? So this was this is the story.
But I mean, you do what you have to do, right? I mean,
yeah, sure.
And what I was saying is like when the framework starting to come around, I looked into them, and I didn't want to bloat. My stuff was lean and mean, right? And that's what Rife is so cool. There's no dependency in Rife.
This is what I also like. I don't like any dependencies, but but I'm writing a boring software, and in this particular case, no dependency means I commit to a framework. In my case, it's a microprofile, and everything else I don't use. I just use whatever ships with the thing, because if you're building a product, what you are doing, it makes sense. But if you're working for larger companies, the problem is, you are in charge of the entire thing. So from socket to SSL to everything, and this is just too much. So you have to to focus. But really interesting story. So okay, so the Linkblog, but Linkblog was a hobby of you, right? So it's just
yes, it was a hobby, and I except when I was doing the Google ads, and I did a little bit of sponsorship. Atlassian was one of my first sponsor. Mark Cannon-Brooks contacted me. He's like, "Hey, can we advertise on your site?" I'm like, "Yeah."
But Atlassian ran the Java blogs, right?
Yes, and I was involved with that too. I mean, we kind of kind of offered to start it, and he's like, "No, we'll do it in house," and so. We were a tight community, the Java bloggers back then. We kind of all knew each other.
I introduced a little drama because I customized Weblogger, and it was also published on Java blogs.
Yeah.
And because of DNS problems, how I manage DNS, the posts appeared multiple times.
Oh.
And I couldn't do nothing about that. So I tried. This was some problem with Java blogs and virtual hosting on my part.
Yeah.
And some, and some the readers suspected that I'm doing this, to sell more ads, but I had never had ads. Right. So I just apologized, like whatever, right? There was also some drama involved back then. But Java blogs was actually surprisingly popular back then, and I was really stunned that they stopped actually to support it, because it was lean, it was very popular, and there was I would say this is actually it worked well.
Yeah. They were never as popular as my blog was, but
oh really?
No,
really,
no. That's why you advertise on mine. But I had a leg up. I was involved in the beginning of Java blogs. I was already doing my stuff before that.
I was not aware that your blog was that popular. So I knew there was something like this. I also look at your blog from time to time, but I had no idea that you are that big.
I mean, even to this day, where I don't do anything on my blog, really, I still get, probably close to 1 million requests a month. Which is not that, nowhere near what it was, but, I'm not doing the same thing, Yeah, I mean, it's, for the longest time, if you typed Eric with a K in Google, I was number one anywhere, but it's just because time, not, back then it was because I had been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
More than anything else. And so, yeah.
And
so
a question, were Sun Microsystems somehow aware of you? So did they invited you to Java 1, or was it any relation between you and Sun Microsystems?
Yeah, I didn't do, I did a lot when I was working at Apple. I did a lot of Macworlds and so forth. So I didn't do a whole lot of conferences. I did do a few tech days and some conferences here in Seattle. I didn't. I wasn't really into it. I had done too much of it for about a year. And on top of that, I wasn't specifically. I'm kind of always been like a vertical market kind of guy, right? I don't. I've always done open source, even before there was GitHub and so forth. But that's my hobby, right? Even though I may use some of the code for commercial stuff, my commercial stuff you don't know, because I'm a behind the scene guy. I'm not, I come in and fix problems or start something or whatever. I just, I never did like commercial software, on my own.
From the Link was your hobby, and it was a crazy hobby because you became more popular than the commercial products actually. So just for fun, what you did back then with Java in your commercial projects, until
so back then, since I had the library, right, that did pretty much everything that the STL does, we started building websites for customers that they could customize. And the only competitions that we had back then for stores, to sell products was Yahoo stores. That's it. There was nobody else. Again, we were the first one to do the first UPS integration. So you could print a label with your shipping. That there was not even an API. I actually helped them work on that API. But once again, we were too early. There was just not, a lot of people would go to Yahoo store, pay $10 a month. You have a little website, a few pages, and a few things to sell. We were never able to grow it past the little stores. I think one of the biggest store we had was this store that was sold those little soldiers that you paint.
Okay.
They had about 20,000 different soldiers in inventory, which is a lot. And they were really busy. A lot of people bought that stuff online. But that was it. That wasn't a big, like a big name or store or whatever. And that's a lot of my career, too soon, there too soon. And so after that, I moved on to do different things. But a lot of it was based on that, JSP library that I wrote.
But you still stick with Java the entire time?
Oh, the entire time, yeah. When I started, I was doing assembly. Then when I was at Apple, I was doing some Pascal and, C. Assembly, C, Pascal. That was my go-to. And that's what I did for many years. And once I got to Java, that stuff kind of went by the wayside.
Okay. So back then on your how to pick Linkblog. So you were consultant the entire time until now?
Yep. Yeah. I was consulting until about 8 years ago.
Okay. And what do you do now?
Well, I got cancer. So.
Oh.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've had chemotherapy for the last 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wish you all the best. So now you have to do sports.
So
and
it took me a while to get back to programming. I really love it, but I've done clinical studies and stuff like that, and it just took me. I'm finally getting back to being able to work, to do some work.
So welcome back.
Well, exactly, and that's part of dealing with with Rife and BLD, and that's kind of got me back into so the more serious side of open source.
Very good. So what I would love to do is to re-invite you back.
Awesome.
And talk about the migration from Linkblog to Rife and to build BLD and from your perspective, and then why you don't like Kotlin, for instance, is also would be interesting.
Sure.
This is interesting because we never met. I knew you from name.
I knew by name too, and it's a lot of people like that. I mean, we all kind of revolve. I mean, it was the same with Yurt. I mean, we know the same people, but we actually never connected. But we know the exact same people, but it's just like we never, been in a room together or whatever until fairly recently. I knew of him, he knew of me, but we actually never, just the way it is, When you've been doing it a long time, you know a lot of people.
For me, it's even crazier because I'm working full time and conferences. If I get invited, so I go to conference, but I have actually no time for conferences. So what happens is I spend a conference maybe half a day or one day. So I know the people say, hey, but I have no time, to speak to the other speakers. And I just this is why I started a podcast to give me opportunity, to know what the others are actually doing is a nice way to learn about the other persons, the technology, and the ideas behind, because there are so many motivations. So why you building software and how you think about things, and this is what I like about podcasting and the Java community, because it's almost unique. If you think, what happened, every story is different. So it's like 280 episodes or something here, and it is so many stories and people from assembly to high level languages, and everyone loves Java. So I thought that Java is like almost like a Visual Basic. If someone knows C or C++ will never use Java. But the opposite is true. There were people were burned by assembly and C and C++, but they love Java because they feel productive in it. So this is what stunned me, right?
Well, I mean, the thing is that this fads, now it's Rust, and you got all those things. There's all those languages that come up, and they don't always work out. It's always it's the best thing since and then a year later, it's like, but there's this problem and that problem and this problem, right? And I think Java, on the other hand, has sustained. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are problems with Java.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the bloat is a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it's been a pretty steady language. Pretty much since day one.
Yeah, I was actually scared twice, or I was a little bit suspicious what happens with Java. Once was as Ruby on Rails came out, and I got asked, continuously to 2006, Java is dead, and now everything is Rails. And the second time, Scala has introduced XML parser. So after they introduced XML parser, everyone in my enterprise company say, look, we have Scala can parse XML and SOAP natively, Java cannot. So I said, okay, I don't like to have SOAP and XML, but I saw that everyone was excited about. You should you should never underestimate marketing. This is a big thing, and this was the two parts. But I would say Java is going strong, and what I also found accidentally, this is very compatible with BLD and Rive. This may be the last note for today. Is the org JSON library, the reference implementation of JSON. So I used that, and I was curious actually how it looks like on GitHub. So I took a look, and the crazy stuff is how to build this. So you clone the library, and then just say Java C, and you have it.
Yep.
And this is how it should be. Actually, I miss it a little bit that we get more and more such libraries. And I was also stunned that Hurt is Hurt. Bevin also mentioned several times no dependencies, because this I really hated, so complete different take to yours. In my project, it's like more like you have to deal with software which was written by external consulting companies, and for unknown reasons they included whatever dependencies they knew, and you have a huge tree of dependencies and no one knows what it does. And sometimes I remove dependencies and it works, as well as with the dependencies. So in one point of time, I always said, no dependencies. So tell me first why you need it. Is this a business case? Are we fast or whatever? And then we include it. And, in conference or whatever, I got some heat always because they told, okay, dependencies this is what in the software, you cannot just be without dependencies. I'm not telling you that we not using dependencies. No. We have an Excel, with a reason, and we will try to find, the functionality in Java first, then on the application server. If we cannot find it, then go ahead. And Hert and you have the same argument, or more maybe different arguments to the same result, because and this is what I found interesting, because we have the same motivation from complete different angles, right?
Well, I mean, the one thing that I would say, I leave it as the last statement, is that I've converted about 60 projects to BLD at this point. Mm-hmm. If you look at my GitHub, they pretty much been converted, and it made my life so much easier. Mm-hmm. I don't have to deal with Gradle. I don't have to deal with all the all the crap that comes with Gradle. I mean, it's got its place, but this is so much easier. And until you try it, I don't think you realize it. Until you actually play with it and you actually do convert a project, and it's just like, I don't worry about it anymore. It's just, on top of that, we can talk about it, but as a little teaser, I can tell you that we're the fastest one in town. Even for compiling Kotlin, we are faster than IntelliJ IDE compiling Kotlin.
Okay, this is what I almost suspected, that something will happen, right? But for the next episode, we can cover Rife or Builder. The order, I don't care. So this is, your job, to start. You say, okay, we can start with Builder or Rife, or we can have 2 episodes, one about Builder and one about Rife. And I just would like to talk about that because they're interesting project, interesting story, and it's also, here using for the Moog synthesizers, and it is actually used in production, and it's a completely different take, what I really like.
And then this is what we come back to. He instead of using something that existed, he went back to something that is needed before.
Yeah.
And made it work for today's technology.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you and I were talking about.
Yeah. I'm only happy that you didn't met, had 20 years ago. So it would be like, the company would explode just, This is both in one team. I cannot imagine what would happen, So I don't know. We would get Java 25 10 years ago or something, because it was incredible.
Well, thank you.
Thank you a lot. Where people can find you? So just, what is your...
So eric.taven.net, that taven.net, or on GitHub, eTaven is pretty much my handle on every single Twitter and Mastodon and so forth. But eric@taven.net will do the trick.
I tried to search Eric with the K on Google, and it doesn't work anymore, I have to say. So we have to do something about that. Maybe after the podcast, so this would change everything. But
it's not there anymore.
No, Eric Johansson is the first one which I can find. I don't know who it is, but yeah.
Well, if you try Eric Taven, you should.
Yeah, this of course, but we should work on the Eric, just Eric. So thank you a lot, and see you next time.
All right, have a good one.